Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the Paragon of Korra? Part 1. Huge shout out to Deus Swiftblade for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. As the ship sailed through the sea in the night, its captain and crew unaware of what was in the cargo hold. They were sailing from the South Pole to Republic City, the capital of the United Republic of Nations. It was an easy job, and the ship was a part of a company that sailed the trade route between the two countries. So no one bothered to check the cargo hold for stowaways. This made it easy for said stowaway and her polar bear dog to hide. Korra knew that she should try and sleep, but she was just too excited to do that. She had just left the compound where she had grown up and trained in since she was 5 and going out to a new place. She was going to Republic City to find a specific person. Tenzin, the only remaining airbender master left in the world and her predecessor's son. The reason why she was going to him was because she was the new avatar and she needed to learn airbending. She had learned waterbending, earthbending, and firebending from her time in the compound, but when it came time to learn airbending, Tenzin and his family, who were supposed to move to the compound, only stayed for the night. She had pitched the idea that if he couldn't move to her, she would move to him only to have the Order of the White Lotus shoot it down. So, she snuck out of the compound, said goodbye to her parents, and then snuck aboard this ship. She was so excited that her stomach was filled with butterflies at the thought of what she was doing. Calm down, Korra, she told herself as she leaned against Naga's fur. Republic City won't get to you any faster if you stay this excited. It had taken her some time, but she finally fell asleep. However, it had felt like she had just closed them when she heard noises coming from outside of the ship. She rubbed the grogginess from her eyes, and when she recognized the sounds, her energy came back in an instant. Naga, we're here, she told her polar bear dog. She leapt up from where she was sitting, but hid behind a stack of boxes so she wouldn't be caught right away. As the nearby loading door opened, the light from outside blinded her, causing her to rise up her hand to block it. But once it didn't hurt so much, she turned and went back to Naga. Come on, girl, she said, urging the polar bear dog to get up. Once Naga was up and Korra mounted her, they practically flew out of the ship. Thanks for the ride. Korra shouted at the workers as she rode past them, surprising most of them and causing a few to fall on their rears. As the polar bear dog and her rider rode out of the docks, Naga began to slow down. Korra began to look at the city and was amazed by what she had seen. Wow, look at this place, she said to the polar bear dog. She looked up at the nearby bridge and saw how clogged it was. I've never seen so many Satomobiles. Truly, what she was seeing was nothing like she had ever seen before in her life. She turned her eyes away from the bridge and out over the water. Her eyes locked onto the small island out in the bay, or rather, onto the statue that placed on the small island out in the bay. It was a statue of her predecessor, Aang. He held a staff with the symbol of airbending on its tip and had a serene expression on his face as he looked at the city he had helped create. Korra knew about Aang. Having been his successor to being the avatar, she had been curious about him and read everything and anything she could get her hands on about him. It also helped that her waterbending master was Katara, Aang's wife. He was a legend that helped end the 100-Year War by defeating Fire Lord Ozai in single combat and helped create the United Republic of Nations. Truth be told, she felt awed and intimidated at the sight of her predecessor, and it felt like that he was watching her. She turned her gaze away from the statue and looked at the larger island to the left of it. Air Temple Island, she said as she recognized it instantly. That's where Tenzin lives. You ready for a little swim, girl? She asked Naga, who sniffed the air and charged down the street instead. Okay. Food first, then Air Temple, said Korra. Unfortunately, Naga's tracking of the scent of food led the two of them right into the middle of traffic, the opposite way. Watch it, Naga. Look out. Her rider screamed as she hung a right and rode off the main street. Korra looked back at the semi-chaos that they had caused before turning her head back to see where they were going. It wasn't any easier since they were currently running through crowds of people. Whoops, sorry about that. Excuse us. Coming through. Heads up. Sorry, we're new in town, she told the people as they quickly got out of the way of the polar bear dog. Naga soon found the scent she was tracking coming from a small stand on the corner. She poked her head through the drape on the side of the stand and saw all kinds of meat waiting to be eaten. She opened her jaws to eat, only to stop when her rider said, Naga, wait. She closed her jaws and lowered her head with a disappointed whine. Korra hopped off the polar bear dog and went around to the stand proper. We'll take one of everything, please, she told the stand lady as she took a stick of meat and held it in her hands. That'll be 20 yuans, the lady told her. She froze momentarily. In her haste and excitement to leave the South Pole, she had forgotten about that. I don't have any money. Then what good are you to me? The lady demanded as she took the meat stick back. Both human and polar bear dog walked away from the stand disappointed and a little hungry. Don't worry, girl, Korra told Naga. The city's huge. I bet we could find a place to rustle up something to eat. As it turned out, the only place that they could do just that was in the park in the middle of the city. Korra found a few thick sticks and speared 3 fishes from the river, while Naga simply waded into the river and looked for fishes on her own. Korra stabbed the sticks into the ground and bent a small fire to roast the fishes. Even as she did that, the smell of the fishes made her mouth water and her stomach grumble. When she was done roasting the 3rd fish, she quickly blew the smoke off of it and placed it in her mouth, ready to bite down. But she froze when she saw a guy coming out of a bush to her left. She hadn't expected him to be there. Say, think I can get one of them tasty smelling fishies?" he asked from where he stood in the bush. She had been surprised, but she did remember her manners. Yeah, sure, she told him, prompting him to come out of the bush, take one of the fishes, sit down, and begin to eat. Feeling a little bit awkward, she tried to continue the conversation. "So, do you live in that bush?" she asked, pointing at said bush. "Yes, presently that is what I call home. Took me a while to procure a bush that beauteous," he answered, looking up from his fish, and for some reason, the bush sparkled from the light of the sun. "This park is quite popular with all the vagabonds. So there are a lot of you out here. I thought everyone in the city was living it up." She could already feel the excitement of being in the big city disappearing. It didn't help that the guy started laughing when he heard that. "Hey, you got a lot to learn, newcomer," he told her. "Welcome to Republic City." She could only stare at him in disbelief. That is until she heard a whistle being blown. She turned her head to see where it was and saw a man in a uniform standing on a nearby bridge. "Hey, you," he shouted at them. "Stop. You can't fish here." He started running towards them, and the vagabond leapt to his feet. "You best skedaddle," he told Korra before leaping back into his bush. Korra got up too and whistled sharply for Naga. The polar bear dog ran out of the river and the two of them fled the man in uniform. Korra leapt up onto the saddle Naga was wearing and they fled over a different bridge, leaving the out-of-shape uniformed man panting behind them. As they got further away and onto actual pavement, Naga slowed down to a walk. "That was a little close," Korra said quietly. They were trying to get to Tenzin on Air Temple Island, but that was proving to be more difficult than originally expected. They padded down the park street, looking for a way out, when they heard someone speaking over a megaphone to a small crowd of people. "Are you tired of living under the tyranny of benders?" the man holding the megaphone asked the crowd. "Then join the equalists. For too long, the bending elite of this city have forced non-benders to live as lower-class citizens. Join them on and together we will tear down the bending establishment." "What are you talking about?" Korra asked from the outskirts of the crowd. "Bending is the coolest thing in the world." "Oh yeah?" asked the man. "Let me guess. You're a bender." "Yeah, I am." "Then I bet you just love to knock me off this platform with some waterbending, huh?" Now he was beginning to irritate her. "I'm seriously thinking about it." That proved to be the wrong thing to say. "This is what's wrong with the city," the man suddenly shouted into the megaphone. "Benders like this girl only use their powers to oppress us." That turned the crowd against her. "What? I'm not oppressing anyone," she protested as the crowd shouted at her to get out of there. You're oppressing yourself." But even as she spoke, she could see that it was a lost cause. So she left. That didn't even make any sense. The man with the megaphone shouted after her with a mocking tone. "Okay, Naga, I'll admit it. We're lost," Korra said to Naga as they walked down a street. They had tried getting back to the harbor, but everything looked the same to the new avatar. They probably were going in the wrong direction. Naga looked to her and she raised her hands in small surrender. "Fine, I'll ask." She walked up to an elderly woman who's sitting by her shop talking to a younger man. "Excuse me. I think I'm lost," Korra said to the woman. "How do I get to Air Temple Island from here?" "Just head down this street," the woman answered, pointing down the street. But at the moment that she pointed, a Satomobile came around the corner and down the street. "You should get going, young lady. It isn't safe," she told Korra while standing up and moving away. "What's going on?" Korra thought to herself as the Satomobile came to a stop and 3 men stepped out and walked over to a stall. "Mr. Chung," the man in the gray clothes and hat, said to the shop owner cleaning a phonograph, getting his attention. "Please tell me you have my money or else I can't guarantee I can protect your fine establishment." He turned his body slightly so the smaller man in the red scarf could be seen bending a small fireball in his hand. "I'm sorry, business has been slow," Mr. Chung told them before picking up the phonograph that he had been cleaning and offering it to them. "Please, take one of my phonographs." The firebender lifted his leg and bent a small burst of fire at the phonograph, burning it to pieces and making the owner drop it with a shout. "My friend here is not a music lover," the hat guy told him. "Eyes." A voice from inside the Satomobile shouted out, making all the attention turn that way. The door opened again and a boy about 5 years younger than Korra stepped out. What surprised her was not the fact that he was riding with blackmailers, but the fact that his hair was yellow. She had thought the only way one could get that color was with dyeing. "You said that this was a lunch delivery run. And we are getting lunch just after this," the hat guy told him whilst rolling his eyes. "Come on, Viper," you heard the guy. "It's possible that he's lying so he wouldn't have to pay. These kinds of people will do that, kid. You have to keep a watchful eye on them so they don't slip up. There's an easier way to do this." "Oh yeah, like what?" asked Viper. The boy walked past the 3 adults and went to the shop owner. "How much money do you need to pay?" he asked. 1,000 yuans, Mr. Chung answered, still feeling very nervous about all of this. "I would have to sell nearly 30 phonographs to get that kind of money." "Alright, I'll buy them." He stared at the boy. "What? I'll buy 30 phonographs off of you." He dipped his hand into a pocket on his pants and pulled out a large roll of money as well as a piece of paper. "Just have them sent to this location once you can." Mr. Chung hesitantly took the paper from him and read it, his eyes going wide once he was done reading. "But I can't send them there," he protested. "Of course you can," the boy said. "Trust me, he's not going to complain about it." The shop owner hesitated, but when he saw the 3 men standing behind the boy, he took the cash and then handed it to Viper. Viper scowled but he took the money. "Thank you for your patronage," he snapped at Mr. Chung. The 4 of them turned around and started walking back to the Satomobile. "Next time, don't humiliate me like that, brat," he snarled at the boy. "Next time, don't do it in front of me," the boy said back. "I don't like bullies." "You used the triads' money." "No, I used the money my uncle gave me, there's a difference." "Hey." A girl's voice shouted at them, making them stop in their tracks. When they turned to see who it was, they saw Korra standing on the other side of the street with her hands on her hips. "I think you owe that guy an apology for breaking his phonograph." Viper looked at his other 2 guys and started laughing, but the boy just backed off a little. "Since you're obviously fresh off the boat, let me explain a couple things," Viper said to Korra. "You're in triple threat triad territory and we're about to put you in the hospital. You're the only ones who are going to need a hospital and for your sake, I hope there's one nearby," she said back, smashing her right hand into her left. "Who do you think you are?" he asked with a scowl on his face. "Why do you come and find out?" she asked right back. He took that as an invitation. He dipped his hand into his coat and bent a small body of water at her with a quickness that only came from years of practice. But in spite of that, she grabbed hold of it and bent it right back at him, freezing his head. He tried running forward to punch her, but she just kicked him into the grill of the Satomobile, shattering the ice. "That had to hurt," the boy said from where he was watching. The 3rd man of the 3, wearing a light green jacket, tried to attack but was sent skyward when Korra bent the earth beneath him to shoot up. When he began falling he landed on a wire, bounced into a sign, landed on a pentas, tore a tapestry, and crashed onto a food stand. The firebender, despite looking a little more than terrified, bent a stream of fire at Korra, screaming as he did. She leapt through the stream, bending it to part ways with her, and grabbed hold of his hands. Using her own momentum, she spun around and threw him into the window of a nearby store, smashing it to pieces. "Got any idea of who I am now, chump?" she asked the unconscious person in the store. "And that just leaves one," she thought to herself. But when she turned to find the boy, she saw that he was standing in front of Naga. "This is a polar bear dog," he said as he looked up at her with awe in his voice. "I've read about them." "Hey, get away from Naga," Korra shouted at him. He turned to look at her. "I thought that there were no tamed polar bear dogs. How did you do it?" Even though the question was innocent, it still tore a small hole in her heart. She could remember that day perfectly, and while she was happy that she had Naga, she had to lose someone else to get her. "I said get away. Do you want her to bite you?" The engine of the Satomobile roared to life as Viper started it up and drove down the street. The firebender climbed out of the store he had crashed into and leapt into the back, with earthbending help. "You're not getting away," Korra shouted at them. She ran after them and bent a stream of earth after the Satomobile. It struck and sent the contraption flying upwards before coming back down. When it landed, it crashed into 2 stores before stopping. Both she and the boy, along with Naga, went up to the hole where the Satomobile had crashed. "Ha, serves them right," Korra declared as she watched the 3 triad members stumble out of the Satomobile. A siren began to sound off over their heads, making Naga howl in response, and when she looked up, the girl from the South Pole saw an airship above them. "Police!" someone shouted over a microphone. "Freeze where you are." 3 people leapt out of the airship and fell down to the ground. It looked like they were about to kill themselves when they stretched out their hands and cables shot out attached themselves to the buildings on the street. "Cool. Metallbenders," said Korra as she watched them land. "I caught the bad guys for you, officers," she told them as the triad members stumbled out of the shop. "Arrest them." The officer in charge ordered the other two. They stepped forward, bending their metal cables at Viper and the other two triad members. The cables wrapped themselves around their body with a speed and force that made them fall to the ground. While they were being taken away, the officer in charge walked to Korra. "You're under arrest too," he told her. She hadn't expected that news and it surprised her greatly. "What do you mean I'm under arrest? Those are the bad guys over there." She pointed over at the triad members being taken away. They were smashing up a shop. "Everything was perfectly fine until you open your mouth," the blonde kid told her from where he stood by Naga. "And have you seen the damage you've caused?" He was looking at a street that looked like it would need some serious repairing. The officer nodded in agreement to what he said and bent his cable at Korra. She instantly dodged it and then grabbed hold of it. "Wait, you can't arrest me. Let me explain." "You can explain yourself all you like down at headquarters," he told her, pulling his cables back. He leapt forward and attacked Korra, forcing her to step back away from him. Naga came to her friend's defense and knocked the officer away with her head. Seeing her chance, Korra went for the saddle on Naga's back. "Come on," she said to the kid as she passed him, grabbing him by the shirt. "Wah hey," he shouted in surprise as he was thrown onto the back of the polar bear dog without warning. Then she landed in front of him on the saddle and the polar bear dog took off, forcing him to hold on. "I'm not with her," he shouted to the cops as they chased after them. One of them made a leap for them only to have the girl's boot meet his face and push him away. While one of the other cops checked on the guy who got kicked, the other went for the cables overheard and began sliding on it after the polar bear dog, bending his cables at them and missing by a few scant inches. When they came to another street, Korra had Naga turn right and head for the nearby bridge. For a moment, it felt like they were safe. But just as they were crossing the bridge, she felt the hair of her topknot being pulled back sharply, making her grunt in pain. She reacted on instinct and bent the water beneath the water up and froze it into an iceberg. The pain and tightness on her topknot disappeared and when she looked back, she saw the officer had crashed into the iceberg. "That's probably going to hurt," she remarked. "You think?" the boy asked her as he held on tightly. She didn't reply, she just had Naga run up some stairs onto a bridge that was also a street, which was weird to her. As Naga tried to avoid the oncoming Satomobiles, two more police officers appeared on the cables alongside her, so she turned Naga toward the edge. "What are you doing?" the kid shouted at her, confusing coloring his voice. Then he saw a train passing underneath them and realized what she was planning to do. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," he began screaming. With a few steps, Naga leapt over the side of the street and onto the train. She slid forward and almost off the side, but recovered and got her hind legs back on the train. She kept her body pressed to the roof and Korra was right there with her. But the tribeswoman sat back when she saw Air Temple Island pass by. She had been trying to get there this entire time and now it was right there in front of her. "Well, at least I know where to go now," she thought to herself. Once she lost the police, getting there should be easy. Then she realized that something was pressing against her chest and when she looked down, she saw that it was a pair of hands groping her breasts. Her cheeks went red instantly as she realized what that meant. "Hey, let go," she shouted at the kid behind her, also figuring out that his head was pressed against her back. "I'm not falling to my death from a polar bear dog ridden by a very crazy but very pretty lady on top of a moving train," he shouted back, pressing his head harder against her back. For some reason, his words just made her blush harder. The sound of an airship began ringing again in their ears and they saw that another one had appeared right over their heads. Korra urged Naga forward and jump off the train onto a nearby building. But just as she landed, cables shot out of the airship and grabbed hold of her, lifting her up into the air. Before Korra or her passenger could do anything to help her, they were caught by cables as well. She tried to struggle free, but it was pointless. They had been caught. Location: Republic City Police Headquarters. "Let's see," said the woman with hair the color of iron and wearing black metal armor, showing she was police as she walked behind Korra and the boy with a clipboard in a room of metal. "Multiple counts of destruction of private and city property, not to mention resisting arrest." Suddenly, she slammed the clipboard down on the table next to Korra, whose hands and the kids were cuffed too. "The two of you are in a whole mess of trouble." "I am not with her, I am an innocent bystander," the kid said in protest. "Then what were you doing with a group of triple threat triad members?" she asked him. "They said it was a lunch run." "Yeah, and then you decided to stop and bully an innocent shopkeeper." Korra snapped at him. "Everything was perfectly fine until you opened your mouth and started a fight." "Pan it," the woman barked at the both of them. "You should have called the police and stayed out of the way." "But I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. It's my duty to help people," Korra told her. "See, I'm the avatar." The kid looked at her like he was in shock, but she didn't pay attention to that. Her attention was on the officer. "Oh, I am well aware of who you are," she told the tribeswoman. And your avatar title might impress some people. But not me, she declared with a hard tone. Korra just stared at her for a moment before acknowledging that tactic wasn't going to work. Alright, fine. Then I want to talk to whoever's in charge. For some weird reason, the kid lost his shocked expression and began to snicker. You're talking to her. I'm Chief Beefrong, she introduced herself. Wait, Beefrong? Lin Beefrong? Korra asked, knowing the name. It was one Tenzin had mentioned during some of his trips down to the South Pole. Dear Toph's daughter. What of it? She said. Well then, why are you treating me like a criminal? Avatar Ong and your mother were friends. They saved this side of the planet together. That's ancient history. And it's got diddly squat to do with the mess you're in right now. You can't just waltz in here and dole out vigilante justice like you own the place. I'd say it was more of a showing off beatdown, the kid remarked. And you've been told to stay away from the triple threat triad, Lin said, swinging her head to look at him. But he just rolled his eyes. You've told me that, but the last time I checked, you're not in charge of my life. And it's not like he's going to do anything about it. Honestly, what is wrong with hanging out at my uncle's place? You mean besides the trouble you're in right now? How many times do I have to say it? I was an innocent bystander. One of the panels on the wall slid open to reveal a cop's face. Chief, Councilman Tenzin is here, he announced. Lin looked over at him and then looked away with a sigh. Let him in, she ordered before getting up from her chair. The part of the wall slid away and Tenzin walked in with a stern expression on his face. That, along with his pointed beard, bald head, gray eyes, and airbending master tattoos, made look rather intimidating. Tenzin, sorry, Korra said to him. I got a little sidetracked on my way to see you. A little sidetracked? The kid said, making her scowl at him. Tenzin just took a deep breath and looked at the only other adult in the room. Lin, you're looking radiant as usual, he began. Cut the garbage, Tenzin, she told him, cutting him off. Why is the Avatar in Republic City? I thought you were supposed to be moving down to the South Pole to train her. My relocation has been delayed, he answered before turning his gaze on Korra. The Avatar, on the other hand, will be heading back to the South Pole immediately, where she will stay put. But Korra tried to protest. If you will be so kind as to drop the charges against Korra, I will take full responsibility for today's regrettable events and cover all the damages, he finished. Lin looked back at Korra once and heaved a resigned sigh. Fine, she agreed, bending the cuffs Korra wore open. Get her out of my city. Hey, what about me? The kid demanded, lifting his hands to make the cuffs jingle. She turned to scowl at him. You are going to stay right there until your grandfather comes in to get you. He paled slightly at those words, only for Tenzin to speak again. Actually, Lin, he will be coming with me. The chief of Republic City's police snapped her head around to look at him, searching for something. When she found it, she rolled her eyes. He's left the city again, hasn't he? Korra was at a loss, but it sounded like the boy knew what they were talking about. Oh great, another extended stay at Air Temple Island. Why can't he ever trust me to stay in the apartment by myself for once? Or even with my uncle? Both of the adults shot him a look that made him fall silent. Fine, he can go with you too, Lin said, opening his cuffs as well. Always a pleasure, Lin, Tenzin said to her. Let's go, you two, he told the kid and Korra, who got out of their chairs and followed him out of the room. As she passed the chief, Korra got an I'm watching you gesture from her. Feeling a bit insulted and snotty, she returned it mockingly before walking out of the room, leaving a slightly bewildered Lin behind. Tenzin, please, Korra begged as the three of them stood in the reception room of the police pound, whose other occupants were a little old lady and a large platypus bear. Don't send me back home. You blatantly disobeyed my wishes and the orders of the White Lotus, he reminded her sternly. Batara agreed with me that I should come. She said that my destiny is in Republic City. Don't bring my mother into this, he said, the top of his head going red as he tried not to shout. Tenzin, your head's gone red, the kid remarked from where he leaned against the wall, earning him a scowl from the airbending master. Look, I can't wait any longer to finish my training, Korra told him. Being cooped up and hidden away from the world isn't helping me be a better avatar. I saw a lot of the city today, and it's totally out of whack. I can understand now why you need to stay. Before she had just assumed that it was for a pointless reason. Republic City does need you. But it needs me, too. Tenzin could see the logic behind those words, but he still tried to come up with a defense, only to find that there wasn't any. The sound of a prison door opening allowed him to stop thinking about it and look to see a police officer standing before them with Naga on the leash. Is this your polar bear dog, miss? He asked Korra. His hair was already a complete and utter mess, but Naga just made it worse by licking it upwards. The kid started giggling at the sight of it. You look ridiculous, he told the officer. Location: Air Temple Island. Night had fallen over the city by the time Tenzin brought his charges back to the island. He had been quiet throughout the ride, letting Korra watch as the city lights grew distant. When they passed the statue of Aang, he looked up at his father and wondered if he was doing the right thing. When the boat docked at the island, a larger ship was waiting for them, along with 3 members of the White Lotus. Korra gave a defeated sigh and started walking towards them. She stopped when she saw 2 gliders flying down towards her. As they got closer, she saw that they held Jinora, Ikki, and Milo, who piggybacking on Jinora, Tenzin's 3 kids. Korra. They all shouted happily together as they landed, running towards her into a hug. "Are you coming to live with us on the island?" Ikki asked her as she lifted her head up to look at her. "No, I'm sorry, Ikki," she replied, bending down so that she was at face level with them all. "I have to go home now." Tenzin frowned slightly as his children gathered by his side and watched as the girl from the South Pole, along with her polar bear dog, walked towards the ship while the members of the White Lotus members came to her. "Wait," he said, breaking the silence that hung over them all. Korra turned back to look at him coming towards her with a little bit of surprise in her eyes. "I have done my best to guide Republic City toward the dream my father had for it, but you're right. It has fallen out of balance since he passed. I thought I should put off your training to uphold his legacy." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "But you are his legacy. You may stay here and train airbending with me," he declared, removing his hand. "Republic City needs its avatar once more." Joy and happiness washed over her when she heard those words. It seemed like her efforts to come here wouldn't be in vain. "Yes. Thank you. You're the best," she told him. She then picked up his children and him into big platypus bear hug and she could feel Naga rubbing her back with her head. "Oh great, the crazy avatar is staying," the blonde kid remarked loudly from where he stood behind them all. A single pack was slung across his back and he didn't look too happy to be there. When he looked at the younger kids there, a small smile appeared on his face. "Hey there, runts," he said to them, making Ikki and Milo smile back at him. Korra put Tenzin and his family back down and Jinora turned to look at him. "Could you please stop calling me that?" she asked him with an annoyed expression on her face. "You're only 2 years older than me. And I'm taller, so I can still call you runt." He turned around to face the island. "If you guys still need some time alone, I'll just head on up to my room." He walked off the dock and began climbing the stairs that led to the island proper. "He has a room here?" Korra asked as she watched him disappear from sight. "He's been here enough times to have one," Jinora told her. "Who is he?" "I never got his name." That fact hadn't really hit her until just now and she felt a little embarrassed about it, but in her defense, there was a lot going on. "His name is Arashi Uzumaki," Tenzin told her. She went still at that piece of information. She had heard that last name before in her lessons at the compound and from the stories she heard Katara tell her. "You don't mean as in?" she tried asking. Thankfully, he knew what she was trying to say and nodded. "Yes. He is the grandson of Naruto Uzumaki, the paragon of the Fire Nation." Korra sat at the breakfast table with a newspaper in her hands. And, in the final round, the Buzzard Wasps won with a decisive knockout. She read from the sports page in the newspaper, excitement coursing through her voice. She lowered the newspaper enough to look across the table at Tenzin. "What do you say we go to the arena tonight, catch a few pro-bending matches?" she asked him. Unfortunately for her, his reply was not what she wanted to hear. "That sport is a mockery of the noble tradition of bending," he declared, taking a sip from his cup. They were having breakfast and they weren't alone in the room. "Come on, Tenzin. I've dreamed about seeing a pro-bending match since I was a kid and now I'm just a ferry ride away from the arena," she begged. "Korra, you are not here to watch that drivel," he told her sharply. "Hey, that drivel is fun to watch," Arashi said from where he sat between the two of them, his blue eyes pointing an accusation at the airbender. "You've seen some?" Korra asked him. He just gave her a look. "I live in the city. Of course I've seen some matches." "She is not going," Tenzin said firmly. "She is here to complete her avatar training." He looked at the avatar in question. "So, for the time being, I want you to remain on the island. Is that why you're keeping the White Lotus sentries around to watch my every move?" she asked him with a voice equally annoyed and snarky. She cast a look at the White Lotus guardsmen standing against the walls of the room, watching her, Tenzin, Arashi, and the air acolytes eating. "Yes. In order to learn airbending I believe you need a calm, quiet environment, free from any distractions." She wanted to find fault with those words, but she had no defense against it. "Alright, you're the master," she said, acknowledging the fact. But still, she turned to look out the window at the arena with longing. She really wanted to go there and see the home of pro bending. "Hey," Arashi said, getting her attention again. "Yeah?" she asked, turning her head back to look at him. "Are you done with that?" He pointed at the newspaper she had placed on the table. "Yeah, I am." "Good." He took the paper and started looking through it. "What are you looking for?" "The particular team they were playing last night." "Oh, which one?" she asked. She had read about all the teams who were playing and who had been eliminated, but she didn't have a favorite team. The one I'm rooting for. He had stopped flipping through the pages and began reading intently. Which one is it? He looked up and frowned. Don't you have some training to do? I'm trying to read here. That is an excellent idea, Tenzin agreed, wanting to change the subject. He stood up from the table. Korra, please change into the clothes that have been left in your room and meet me outside in 5 minutes. She scowled at the blonde, but did as she was told. She went to her room, dressed in the robes of an airbending novice, but rolled up the sleeves and kept her armband on, and went back outside to meet up with Tenzin. So, my mother has informed me that you've never been able to airbend before, he commented as they began walking towards the training grounds. She stopped and sighed. Yeah, but I don't know why, she told him as she placed her hand on her head. The other elements came so easily to me, but every single time I've tried airbending she blew a short raspberry and finished with nothing. That's perfectly alright, he told her while placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We just need to be patient. As he spoke, he pulled down her rolled up sleeves so that they looked like they should. Often the element that's most difficult for the avatar to master is the one most opposite to the avatar's personality. For Aang, it was earthbending. She could understand what he was telling her, but that didn't make her feel any better. Yeah, well, I'm about as opposite an airbender as you can get. If Tenzin heard her say that, he didn't let it show. Let's begin your first lesson. Having no other choice, she followed through the temple to the training ground, where Jinora and her siblings were already waiting. Korra's gonna airbend. Korra's gonna airbend. Ikki shouted happily, doing a little hop in place. Korra would have smiled at the sight had her attention not been on the thing behind the kids. What is that contraption? She asked Tenzin as they climbed the steps to it. It looked like someone had clumped a lot of wooden banners with the symbol of the air nomads on them. The time-honored tool that teaches the most fundamental aspect of airbending, he answered. Jinora, would you like to explain this exercise? He asked his eldest. She nodded. The goal is to weave your way through the gates and make through the other side without touching them, she explained to Korra. Seems easy enough, the tribeswoman remarked. They were just standing right there, after all. Jinora forgot to say that you have to make it through while the gates are spinning, Ikki added. Tenzin stepped forward, bent the air around him upwards and then at the gates, making them start spinning around and around rather rapidly. Undisturbed by what he had just caused, the airbending master held up a single leaf in his fingers. The key is to be like the leaf, he explained to the avatar as he bent the leaf forward into the gates, watching as it disappeared into the spinning of the gates. Flow with the movements of the gates. Jinora will demonstrate. She nodded once to her father and went for the gates. As she approached, she started turning around and around, but still kept moving through them all, always turning when it looked like she was going to hit one. Airbending is all about spiral movements, Tenzin lectured Korra as they watched his daughter. When you meet resistance, you must be able to switch direction at a moment's notice. Somehow, Jinora made to the other side of the contraption and started the gate spinning again with a blast of air. Korra realized that it was now her turn. Let's do this, she declared, running towards the gates. But instead of turning away from the resistance of the gate, she just charged right in. This idea resulted in her getting hit every single time by a gate and getting sent in a different direction than she had planned. Every time she got hit, she grunted loudly in pain, especially when the gates had sent her flying back to the ground in front of Tenzin, right on her butt. Determined to beat the thing, she got back up and charged again, only to get the same results again. Why isn't this damn thing working? She thought to herself. It didn't help that the kids were trying to be helpful as well. Don't force your way through. Jinora shouted. Dance. Dance like the wind. Ikki called out. Be the leaf. Milo told her while doing an arm movement to emphasize his point. She tried getting through, but just kept getting hit and redirected, each time with obvious pain. When the gates had finally sent her out of their midst, she looked like she had 2 black eyes and spinning in circles, completely dizzy from getting hit and redirected like that. She twirled for a few seconds before falling to the ground. When she arched her head back to look at Tenzin, she could see him sigh in disappointment. She wanted to say something in reply to that sigh, but was too tired to do so. The only thing she was glad for at that moment was that Arashi hadn't been there to see it. He would have laughed his ass off, she was sure of it. By the time night had fallen, she had gotten no further in learning airbending. It didn't help that she couldn't even bend a simple gust of air. Airbend. She cried, moving her arms and hands at a newspaper hanging on a line in front of her. She had tried to get some inspiration for airbending by using a newspaper with a chief of police in a picture, but was still getting nothing. What is wrong with me? She demanded to no one in particular, although Naga was close by. Airbend. She told herself again as she thrust her hands at the newspaper. When she still got nothing, her frustration broke loose and she burnt the paper to ashes with a single blast of fire. Maybe I'm just not cut out to be an airbender, huh, Naga? she asked the polar bear dog. Suddenly, the sound of a radio turning on went off in her ear and she turned to the nearby building where it was coming from. "Ladies and gentlemen," the commentator began. "I'm coming to you live from Republic City's Pro Bending Arena, where tonight the best on this side of the planet continue their quest for a spot in the upcoming Memorial Championship tournament. Grab your snacks and grab your kids because this next match is gonna be a doozy." Her interest was caught and she got closer to listen in. Since she saw that members of the White Lotus were listening to the radio, she climbed up onto the roof and listened in from there. It proved to be worth it because she might have just been listening to the match, but it was very exciting. "This Mako's got moxie," the commentator declared as sounds of the match echoed past his commentary. "Yomo is hammered back into zone 3. Clock is winding down, can Yomo hold on? He's teetering on the edge of the ring now. The fire ferrets like up to Strick." The radio went off, leaving her hanging. What happens next? What happens next? She asked in her mind while her face twitched in a state of horrified surprise. "Korra, come down here, please." Tenzin's voice ordered her from beneath the roof. She bent down over the edge to look and saw that it was Tenzin standing there behind the White Lotus guardsman. Having no other choice, she flipped off the roof and down onto the ground. "You shut it off at the best part," she complained. "I thought I made myself clear. I don't want you listening to that distracting nonsense," he told her. "But it's their radio," she pointed out, gesturing to the White Lotus guardsman behind her. "And technically, you said I couldn't watch a match. You didn't say anything about listening to one." "You?" He started only to stop himself and take a deep breath. "You know what I meant. Anyway, why shouldn't you be in bed by now?" He turned around and walked away, flapping his cloak closed and hitting her with a small blast of air in the process. She scowled at his retreating back, but once he was out of sight, she turned to look at the guardsman. "So, any chance of getting the rest of the broadcast?" she asked. "Sorry, that was the last match of the night," the guardsman in the center told her. Her shoulders slumped at the news. Oh. The next night, she was in her room looking at the guard surrounding the temple. That day's exercise hadn't gone any better. Instead of making her go through the gate contraption again, Tenzin had her try to sit and meditate. She had gotten bored in about 5 minutes and told Tenzin that, only to be told to relax and be free. She found that funny considering the fact that she couldn't leave the damn island. What irritated her even more was Arashi. The kid was living on the island just like she was, but he could leave at any time and he did. She just knew that he was laughing about it as he left, she just knew it. "Oh, screw it," she thought to herself. She was getting off the island and heading to the arena. But first she had to get past the guards. She climbed out of her window, waited for the guard to leave, and leapt for the ground. Once her feet touched earth, she started running for the edge of the island, leaping into the air once she was there. For a moment, she hung in the air. Then she began to fall to the water below. She bent it upwards to catch her and let it carry her back down to normal height. Once there, she began swimming towards the arena, using her waterbending to quicken her pace. She had done this many times in the South Pole, where the water was warm and the distance between the island and the arena wasn't that far. It had only taken her 15 minutes to reach it. She came up for air next to the arena and saw an open window. "Lucky me," she thought triumphantly, bending the water around her into a cyclone that lifted her up to the window. She leapt through it and then spun once to get rid of the excess water. She was inside. The only problem that she had was that she had no idea where she was. Figuring it was best to look around, she started walking down the hall to find what was where. As she turned a corner and walked down another hall, she saw a large room to her left that looked like a gym. "Now this is interesting," she thought to herself as she stepped into the room, looking around. There seemed to be plenty of nets, stone discs, and barbells lying around to show that the people who used the place were always at it. "Hey!" A voice snapped at her, breaking her of her excited frame of mind. She looked over to see a bulky-looking kind of guy with a towel over his shoulders coming towards her. "What are you doing in my gym?" "Crap," she thought, realizing that she was in trouble. Trying to come up with a lie quickly, she went with, I was just looking for a bathroom and I got lost." "Ah, the old I had to pee excuse," he said mockingly, not buying it for one moment. "You know, I am sick and tired of you kids sneaking in without paying. I'm taking you to security." "No, wait," she said, desperately trying to think of a way out of this. To her surprise, help came in the form of Arashi. "Korra," the blonde kid said as he stood at the entrance of the gym with a guy in a pro-bending uniform. "This is why I told you to go before we left." He walked into the gym along with the pro-bender. "Sorry, Toza, she's fresh off the boat, but with me," he told the old man. The guy just threw his arms up in annoyance. "Ah, just get her out of here. I've got work to do." He turned around and went back to his work, which at the moment was bending a barbell made of rock and stone and tossing it back into the nearby pile. The three of them walked out of the gym and a short while through the hallway before Korra spoke. "Thanks for the save back there," she said to Arashi. "Think nothing of it," he replied. "But in all seriousness, what are you doing here? I thought you were stuck on the island." "Come on, I've wanted to see a pro bending match since I was a kid. Do you really think that I was going to let being stuck on the island stop me? The better question is, why are you here?" "I always come here to cheer on my favorite team," he told her. The pro bender walked beside them, cleared his throat rather loudly. "Oh yeah, Korra, this is Bolin, the earthbender for the Fire Ferrets. Bolin, this is Korra." "Nice to meet you," Korra greeted Bolin with a smile. No, it's nice to meet you," he said to her, returning her smile with a charming one. His black hair and green eyes suited him, and his build showed that he was an earthbender. Before she could even reply to that, Arashi spoke. "Bolin, you've got a match. Now is really not the time for flirting." That got the attention of the tribeswoman. "Wait, there's a match about to happen?" she asked excitedly. "Yes indeed," Bolin declared. "Would you like to watch?" "You bet I do." She didn't know why Arashi was rolling his eyes at her, but didn't care at that moment. She was finally getting her wish. "Then please follow me." He took the lead and walked down the hallway. Korra and Arashi followed him to a door on the side. "I present to you the best seats in the house," he declared with a slightly exaggerated tone, opening the door for them. Korra walked in and the first word out of her mouth was, "Whoa." Bolin hadn't been kidding. They weren't in the stands that surrounded the hexagonal ring and the large body of water beneath it. In fact, they were beneath the stands and had an even better view because of it. "This place is even more amazing than I imagined," she said as she looked at everything. "Yeah, I was like that too, the first time I saw this place," Arashi agreed with a small smile on his face. Bolin was about to make his move when he heard his brother say, "PSST, Bolin." "Yeah?" he asked, turning around and heading over to his brother, who was at the locker in the back. "I told you, you have to stop bringing your crazy fangirls in here before the matches," his brother said as he put on the rest of the uniform. "Get her out of here." "Oh, come on, Mako. Alright, look, I kinda invited her here, but man, I've got a good feeling there's something special about her." "I know it," he pleaded. "Besides, it's not all bad. Arashi knows her." He went back over to Korra and grabbed her by the hand. "Come here, I want you to meet my brother, Mako." "Mako?" she repeated, surprised and excited to have an opportunity. "Whoa, I heard you play on the radio," she said to him, holding out a hand. "Come on, Bolin, we're up," Mako said to his brother, ignoring her as he walked past. "Or I could meet him later," she remarked, staring at her outstretched hand. "Don't worry about it," Arashi told her, still at the railing. "When Mako's ready to play, he's ready to play. Just wait for the end of the match." "Okay, I gotta go." "Wish me luck," Bolin said, putting on his helmet and securing the strap. "Not that I'll need it. One of these days, that's going to come bite you in the ass, Bolin." Arashi shouted after the earthbender as he joined his team. Korra said something a little different. "Good luck. Knock them out." The lights in the stadium went dark and a single light shined down on the ring, prompting cheers of excitement to come out of the crowd. The announcer in the ring appeared in a stance that looked a little more than exaggerated and with a microphone in hand. "Introducing the Fire Ferrets," he said into the microphone, pointing at Bolin's team as they came to the ring, waving to the crowd and their fans. On the wall next to Korra and Arashi was a large speaker and the commentator's voice began to speak through it. "The rookie Ferrets came out of nowhere and have made it farther than anyone expected this season, despite the fact of who one of their previous teachers was. But tonight, they faced their toughest test yet, folks." The Fire Ferrets made their way to the center of the ring on the red side, coming to a stop at the circle. On the blue side of the ring were their opponents. The two teams stared each other down in the seconds that came before the match. To them, it felt a little more than dragged out. But the bell rang, the match was on. "And they're off," the commentator declared as the two teams started bending at one another. The two teams waste no time trying to blast each other out of zone 1. As the first round continued, he made his observations. "Hasuk is the first to feel the heat of the Tigerdillos," he remarked about the waterbender on the Fire Ferrets. "He tries to return the favor, but they're too fast for him," while Mako shows off his trademark cool under fire style. "It's called keeping your head protected," Arashi remarked while rolling his eyes. "Shush," Korra said to him, her eyes focused on the match. Just then, Bolin and Hasuk got knocked back by the opposing team across the line behind them, getting a loud noise from the speakers. "Ooh, the Tigerdillos score with a walloping 1-2 combo. Can their teammate hold on to their zone 1 territory?" the commentator asked while Mako flipped out of the way of the strikes coming his way. But the earthbender waited and stuck as he landed, hitting him square in the chest and pushing him back onto the line, prompting the buzz from the speakers. "Guess not. Mako's over the line. The Tigerdillos get the green light and advance into Ferret territory." "Come on, Ferrets." Korra shouted as the Tigerdillos moved forward and the fighting began again. Looks like Hasuk's in trouble. The commentator said as Hasuk was hit back again by an earth disc. He's in zone 3 teetering over the drink. While the fire ferret waterbender was getting back onto his feet, he was a little slow and the Tigerdillos pounced on that. A blast of water knocked his footing off the ground and another earth disc sent him flying over the edge. And Hasuk takes a dip. He'll be back for round 2. Assuming the fabulous bending brothers can hold their ground until the next round. What the hell, Hasuk? Arashi said mostly to himself as he watched the waterbender swim out of the water onto the platform and then onto the nearby elevator. What's with you lately? The buzz sounded off and his attention went back to the ring, where Bolin and Mako were pushed off into zone 3. Just as soon as that happened, the bell rang, signaling the end of the round. Round 1 goes to the Golden Temple Tigerdillos. The announcer declared as the scoreboard flashed blue in the round 1 glass. Hasuk got back into the ring and the bell was rung for the second round. The fire ferrets are knocked into zone 2 and the Tigerdillos advance. The commentator announced while the Tigerdillos moved forward into the red zone 1. From there, the match continued. For Korra, it was like she could see even move each teammate in perfect slow motion, and with that slow motion, she watched as the ferrets pushed the Tigerdillos out of their own territory and into their own zone 2. The Tigerdillos tried to push back, but the bell rang before they could do it. The fire ferrets inched the round in the closing seconds. It's 1 apiece, still anyone's match as we go into the third and final round. The bell rang and the Tigerdillos went after Hasuk first, making him leap out of the way. But that didn't work as well as he had planned. Hasuk stumbles, and now he tumbles right into his teammate. The commentator said as the ferret waterbender fell atop on Bolin from a blast of water. He and Bolin better untangle quick if they don't want to. At that moment, the Tigerdillo earthbender bent a disc at them and sent them over the edge into the water. Ooh, too late. Oh no, said Korra as she watched this happen. They're not out of the match yet, Arashi told her, keeping his eyes locked firmly on the ring and the only ferret left. It's all up to Mako now. The commentator declared as the remaining fire ferret dodged any and all of the attacks coming at him. He's bobbing and weaving. He's weaving and bobbing. But he's not hitting back. His dodging led him to the edge of zone 3, with his foot almost stepping off the end. If Mako's knocked, the ferret's fabulous season is over. Korra had grabbed hold of her hair and was clutching it tightly in tense excitement. She didn't want Mako to lose, but it seemed to look like it was coming to that. Mako! Shouted Arashi from out of nowhere. Dragon hunts through the forest. She didn't know what he was talking about, but it seemed like Mako had heard him. While the Tigerdillos continued to attack him, he kept avoiding them. He's dancing on the edge of the ring, surviving the 3-on-1 barrage. It seems like his plan to let the Tigerdillos punch themselves out. In the moment the Tigerdillos took to breathe, Mako struck sending the waterbender back across the ring into the water. And his plan is working. Han is in the pool. They've got nothing left in the tank and Mako is on the offensive. The tables had turned with Mako fighting the 2 remaining Tigerdillos just as aggressively. It's 2-on-1. Mako sent the Tigerdillo firebender out of the ring with a single blast of fire. Scratch that, it's 1-on-1 and it's an earth and fire slugfest. Slugfest was the most appropriate word for the fighting. Mako and the Tigerdillo earthbender were throwing so much fire and earth at each other that they were creating a large cloud of dust. The earthbender got hit in the chest and was sent flying back into his own zone 3. He was down on one knee, but had an earth disc ready to be used. There was just one problem, and the commentator summed it up perfectly. There's so much smoke and dust from the firefight, I can't even see where the fire ferret is. That question was soon answered when Mako appeared out of the cloud airborne with a fireball engulfing his hand. He threw it right at the earthbender, breaking through the disc and sending him flying backwards and down into the water. It's a knockout. The commentator shouted as the final bell rang and the crowd went nuts. What a wingdinger of a hat trick, folks. Mako pulls off the upset of the season, winning the match for the fire ferrets. As the scoreboard showed the win for the fire ferrets, Mako took off his helmet and looked around at the people who had watched the match. They started chanting, Mako, Mako, Mako. And there was one particular member of the crowd who was awestruck by him. Wow, Korra thought to herself as she watched a firebender for the fire ferrets come back. It was the only thing she could think at that moment. Woo, Arashi said with a sigh of relief. They had me worried there. Woohoo. Yes. Bolin cheered as he came back into the locker room. One more win, and we're in the Memorial Championship tournament. He told Korra, snapping his fingers. So, what did you think, Korra? He asked, taking off his helmet. Bolin's got some moves, huh? What did I think? She repeated with a big grin on her face, grabbing him by his uniform. What did I think? That was amazing. She let go and pushed him back in an almost playful manner, except that she almost made him stumble to the ground. Whoops, sorry, she apologized with a sheepish grin. You did more harm than good out there. Mako chastised Hasuk as they came back into the locker room. You almost cost us the match. We won, didn't we? Hasuk demanded, taking off his helmet. Barely. He snapped. Get off my case, pal. He threw his helmet down on the bench nearby and stormed out of the locker room without bothering to change. Mako just glowered at the door. Useless. Did you try to see what was going on with him, or did you just go straight for the chiding, Mako? Arashi asked him. He didn't bother to wait for an answer. I'll talk to him later and see what's going on with him. There must be a reason. You guys were incredible out there. Korra said to Mako, turning to face him. Especially you, Mr. Hat Trick. Oh, you're still here? He asked her coldly, heading for the locker. Oh, you're still a jerk. She asked back with an irritated look on her face, making Bolin chuckle. Anyway, she said, looking at the earthbender amongst them. I've been immersed in bending my entire life, but I've never learned how to move like that. It's like there's whole new style here. Think you can show me a few tricks? Absolutely. Said Bolin instantly, drawing out the word. Right now? Asked Mako. Come on, Bolin. Just ignore him, his brother said to Korra, leaning in like it was a secret. Then he started talking a little louder. Yeah, I can show you the basics. I'm just not sure how my earthbending would translate to your waterbending, but we'll figure it out. Won't be a problem, she told him, leaning back slightly and crossing her arms. I'm actually an earthbender. And here we go, Arashi thought to himself. Bolin just looked at her with confusion in his eyes. I'm sorry, no. I didn't mean to assume. Cause I was figuring with your water tribe Jedip that you're a water tribe gal. It was unlikely that he could have made that sound any more awkward. Nope, you're right, Korra said. I'm a waterbender. And a firebender. You forgot to mention airbender, Arashi chimed in. She looked over at him with a frown on her face. I'm still working on that. He shrugged his shoulders. So? You still are one. Bolin looked at both of them intently before finally admitting, I'm very confused right now. Fortunately, Mako figured it out almost right away. She's the avatar, and I'm an idiot, he said aloud. Both are true, Korra said in reply. Bolin just looked at her with a shocked expression on his face. No way, he said before turning to look at his brother. The avatar. He whispered loudly whilst shielding his gaze from Korra and pointing his finger at her. We heard it the first time, Bolin, Arashi told him, rolling his eyes at the sight. How can you not be surprised about this, Arashi? He demanded. That's because I've already met her when she grabbed me while she was being chased by the cops. That and I'm living with her. You're living with the avatar. He just said that, bro, Mako told him. He looked at his brother and then at Arashi, before finally managing to get the slack-jawed expression off of his face. I would be glad to show the avatar my moves, he declared formally. If the lady would like to follow me. The lady would, Korra answered, ready to go for the door. Let's go. Hang on, Arashi said, making the two of them stop in their tracks. Give them a couple of minutes to get out of their uniforms and wash up, Korra. They just came out of a match. He looked over at Bolin. We'll meet you guys in Toza's gym. Alright, the earthbender agreed, seeing the reason for it. The blonde and the avatar left the locker room and went for the gym, retracing their steps. So, how do you know the fire ferrets? Korra asked Arashi. I guess you could say that I'm something of a mini-coach to them, he answered with a slightly bragging tone to his voice. Yeah, but how did you know them? You couldn't have just walked off the street and into their locker room. Couldn't I? Would you just give me a straight answer? Like what was that thing you shouted at Mako during the match? It's a firebending technique that he learned. I was just helping him out when I shouted it out. I've never heard of a technique like that. Obviously, you hadn't been trained by dragons, he remarked while rolling his eyes with great exaggeration. Wait, Mako was trained by dragons? She demanded, almost stopping in her tracks at the thought. But he didn't. Come on, keep moving. She did and they reached the gym in a matter of minutes. They also didn't have to wait long for Bolin and Mako to come into the gym, out of their uniforms and in casual clothes that left their arms bare, giving Korra a nice little view. Alright, let's see what you got. Bolin declared, leading Korra over to a stack of earth discs in front of a net. So, what? She said, looking at the stacks. There were 3 of them with the middle one being larger, separating it into 2 aisles. You want me to bend these things? Yep, let me see how you do. Alright, she replied. She took the stance that her earthbending teacher had ingrained into her head and bent 2 discs at the net, with a thrust of each arm. She watched in satisfaction as they sailed through the air and hit the net square on. That was great. Good power. He praised her. But in a real match, you would be a sitting turtle duck. Not so upright and flat-footed. Stay light on your toes, right up until you need to dig in and strike, he explained, showing her what he was talking about. Then his stance suddenly became firm and he bent 2 discs at the net. Pop, pop. She watched in silence as the discs flew and hit their target. Okay, let me try it again. She went light on her feet, like he had shown her. She moved around for a couple of seconds and then dug in and bent another 2 discs at the net. Wow. Nice adjustment. Bolin said to her. You're a natural at this. Not bad, Mako remarked from where he was leaning against a nearby ladder. What's it take to impress this guy? Korra asked Bolin while gesturing at his brother. What? I said not bad. Don't worry about it, Korra, Arashi told her from where he sat against the wall. That's just something he picked up from his teacher. You mean the dragon? That got Mako's attention. What in the name of the spirits makes you think that I was trained by a dragon? He asked her. Well, that's what he told me, she said, pointing at Arashi. He was talking about his grandmother, Princess Azula. She's the one who was trained by a dragon. And then she taught what she knew to her son, who then taught it to you, the blonde in the room added on at the end. Those words rang a bell in Korra's head and she looked over at Mako with surprise in her eyes. You were trained by Sazan Uzumaki. Like the best pro bender the world had ever seen, Sazan Uzumaki. Yep, my dad, Arashi said, standing up and stretching his legs a lit. She had heard of Sazan Uzumaki, who hadn't, and his status as a pro bender. It was one of the reasons why she had wanted to see a pro bending match for so long. Wait, I had read that Sazan had retired from pro bending and had gone into politics, she said to Mako. How were you able to train under him? Do you want the unofficial version or the official version? Arashi asked before Mako could open his mouth. Her curiosity now aroused, she looked over at him. What's the official version? That my father had stopped by the arena to watch a match and saw Mako firebending in the gym later on. And the unofficial version? She asked. Arashi, don't you dare, Mako warned him. All he got was a grin in reply. Too late, she asked. He looked back at Korra and opened his mouth. Arashi, tell her and I will make you do hot squats until your knees fall off. The firebender snapped at him with a hard scowl on his face. But once those words left his mouth, the scowl disappeared and a look of shocked realization appeared. Sorry, he apologized. Arashi had closed his mouth and the mischievous look he had on his face was swapped for one of determined neutrality. It's fine, he said shortly. Hey, wait a minute, said Korra, realizing something and turning her attention onto the blonde. You were trained by your dad too, right? Think you can show me some moves? He turned his head to look at her. Leave it alone, Korra. Oh, come on. It's not that big of a deal. Just a few moves, that's all I said leave it alone. He shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Korra flinched and took a half step back, caught off guard by the shout. For some reason, he had a little blush on his cheeks and stormed out of the gym. The avatar just watched him go. What was that about? If you want to know, ask him. It's not our place to say, Mako said while shooting a warning glance at Bolin. Anyway, it's getting late. I'm turning in, you kids have fun. He started walking away. Nice to meet you, Avatar Korra, he said to her. Yeah, been a real pleasure, she replied sarcastically. Honestly, what's with this guy? See you upstairs, bro, he told Bolin. Upstairs? Korra repeated, looking at the earthbender beside her. You guys live here? Yup. In the attic, Bolin answered. It's nothing fancy, but we have some great views. So, back to bending. Why don't you throw that combo one more time? She did just that, and the 2 discs flew through the air and hit the net. This is the coolest thing ever. She cheered to herself with a big smile on her face. Location. Air Temple Island. Oh spirits, not this thing again. Thought Korra as she stared down the contraption with an uneasy feeling. It was made even worse by the fact Arashi was now watching as well. Feeling like she had no other choice, she ran right into the contraption and immediately started getting hit by the gates. She tried spinning around but still got hit. Patience, Korra. Tenzin shouted at her. But after getting hit by a gate for the umpteenth time, she had had enough. With an angry roar, she started throwing fire everywhere in the contraption, setting it ablaze and breaking it down in the process. She was just completely and utterly mad at the damn thing. She kept bending fire at the contraption until her arms started feeling heavy and her breathing became tired. She had just started bending in a rage and that worn her out quicker than any fight. She stood there panting in the ruined remains of the contraption and when she looked outside of it, she saw the shocked looks on Tenzin, Jinora, Ikki, Milo, and Arashi. That was a 2,000-year-old historical treasure. What Tenzin started asking her. What is wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with me. She replied, coming out of the contraption. I've been practicing like you've taught me, but it isn't sinking in, okay? It hasn't clicked, you said it would. Korra, this isn't something you can force. If you would only listen to me. I have been. She shouted, cutting him off. But you know what I think. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the reason I haven't learned airbending is because you're a terrible teacher. She pointed an accusing finger at him before stomping off. Yeah, you're a terrible teacher, Daddy. Milo said, pointing at his father. However, that earned him a hard smack on the back of his head from Arashi. Ow. What was that for? He demanded of the blonde, looking up at him with tears in his eyes. That was uncalled for, Milo, Arashi said with a scowl on his face. Your dad isn't a terrible teacher. He's teaching you, isn't he? Don't disrespect him like that. Arashi, I will handle my own children, there's no need for you to speak on my behalf, Tenzin told the blonde with a slight frown. Arashi looked at him for a long second before walking away himself. No one saw Arashi for the rest of the day, and Korra kept to herself as well, even when dinner was ready. Okay. Everyone here? Asked Pima as she brought the tray of food to the table. Wait. She looked around and only saw her husband and children. Where are Korra and Arashi? Honestly, Pima, I am at my wit's end with that girl. Tenzin told her, only hearing the first part of her question. I don't know how to get through to her. She went to his side and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Dear, the best thing you can do for Korra right now is to give Korra some space. Instead of answering her, he looked at his children. You must promise your teenage years won't be like this. He said to all three of them. Denora, being the one who was closest to said years, simply lowered her book and replied in a deadpan manner, I will make no such promises. She brought the book back up and went back to reading. Tenzin cradled his head with his hand at those words. That was not something to look forward to for him. Tenzin, where is Arashi? Pima asked him. You didn't tell me. He took his hand away from his head. I do not know specifically. It's possible he's with his uncle or at the arena. But he usually doesn't leave until after dinner. What happened? He hit me on the head when I called Daddy a terrible teacher. Milo piped up, hoping to get the blonde in trouble. But instead, it got his mother to frown at him severely. Milo, what I have said about tattling. He looked away, knowing that look quite well. To not to, he answered. Good, she said before looking back at her husband. And what did you say? I told him I could take care of my own children, Tenzin said. Dear, you know that he was just trying to help. I know. He heaved a great sigh. His grandfather should stop going away from the city. He has to. With the Avatar still training, who else will make sure the country stay in check? There are 4 Paragons to do that. He can stay in Republic City and watch over his grandson. Tenzin, you know that GNG is in Ba Sing Se running crowd control, Yu is helping Zuko with his ambassadorial duties and I know full well where the 3rd Paragon is, he finished. He remembered that quite well, considering the fact that he had seen that one off, quite happily too. But that didn't change the fact that Naruto Uzumaki should be here in Republic City instead of wherever he was. His grandson needed him. Location. Korra. She retraced her steps inside the arena to find the Ferrets' locker room, running through the hallways to get there. She had a feeling that she was going to miss the match if she slowed down. She didn't want that to happen. Bolin had invited her to the next one, and she was hardly going to let an opportunity like that pass. Thankfully, she saw the door leading to the locker room and slowed down her running into a walk. Taking a breath to steady herself, she opened the door and walked in, seeing Mako and Bolin leaning against the wall and sitting on the bench respectively. I didn't miss your match, did I? She asked them. You guys look like you lost already. We might have as well have, Bolin told her. Asuk's a no good no show. Mako explained with an angry voice and a furious scowl. What? What happened? Korra asked him. If I knew that, would I be here? He asked back. Arashi's gone looking for him, but I don't that he'll find him in time. The door to the locker room opened and a referee poked his head in. You guys got 2 minutes to come out ready to play, he informed the Bending brothers. Or you're disqualified. He pulled his head back and closed the door. Well, there's goes our shot at the tournament and the winnings, Mako declared with a bitter tone to his voice. I know, Arashi is going to be really sad about this, Bolin agreed. Why would Arashi be sad? Korra asked. This isn't just some tournament that we're trying to get into, Mako told her. It's the Sazin Uzumaki Memorial Cup. Oh. It was the only thing that came to her at the moment. Now they really had to get into the match. Can't you ask one of those guys to fill in? She asked, pointing at the other team in the locker room. Nah, the rules say you can only compete on one team, Bolin told her dejectedly. That was when she had an idea. Well, then how about me? She suggested. I'm a top-notch waterbender, if I do say so myself. Both brothers gave her a look. But you're the Avatar, the Earthbender pointed out. Isn't that cheating? It isn't cheating if I only do waterbending. No way, Mako said firmly. I'd rather forfeit than look like a fool out there. Wow, thanks for the vote of confidence, she told the firebender with complete and utter sarcasm. The door opened and the referee showed himself again. Time's up, he announced. You in or out? Korra pounced on the chance before someone could say otherwise. We're in. We are? Mako asked. Yes. Bolin agreed. Hey, I didn't agree to this. His brother protested while he and Korra ran for the locker behind them. You can thank me later, she told him. He just watched as she opened the locker. This girl is crazy, he decided. Come on, Mako, Bolin said to him as he pulled out the spare uniform. We need your help over here. Well, he did roll his eyes at the thought. He did go over and helped Korra put on the uniform. Once it was, they made their way into the ring. Looks like the Ferrets have ferreted out a last-minute replacement, the commentator remarked. Let's see if she's another diamond in the rough like the brothers from the School of Hard Knocks. Don't do anything too fancy or aggressive, Mako told Korra as they waited for the bell to ring. In fact, don't do anything. Just try not to get knocked off the ring. You got it, Captain, she replied. Her helmet slipped a little, but she quickly readjusted it. Players, shouted the referee. Are you ready? He blew his whistle and the bell rang. Korra acted instantly. Bending water with her foot, she threw it at the opposing waterbender, sending him to the ropes and then over the side. She instantly went into a victory dance, ignoring the shocked looks from the other players. Woohoo, man overboard. She shouted. Then the referee blew his whistle, making her stop. Fire Ferret waterbender, penalty. He shouted. Move back one zone. What? Why? She demanded. You're only allowed to knock players off the back of the ring. Not over the sides. Mako told her in an angry whisper, gesturing with his arms to make his point. Oh whoops. She moved backwards feeling really embarrassed. The bell rang again. And we're back in action after that hiccup, the commentator began. But I don't think this replacement player knows what she's doing. Korra was doing her best to participate in the match, but it was like the opposing team knew that she was new to this and targeted her. She tried using a trick Katara had once showed her and flipped up into the air, shooting a glob of water. But when she landed, her foot went past the zone line and the buzzer sounded. Foul. The referee called after blowing his whistle. Over the line. Move back to zone 3. Now she was getting frustrated. I'll show you over the line. She muttered to herself as she moved back. Her teammates watched as she went, Bolin already having second feelings about all of this. The bell soon rang and with the positioning of Korra, it was obvious who the victors were. But still, the commentator had to declare it. The Platypus Bears take round 1. The bell rang again, and the opposing team knew where to throw their bending. The Platypus Bear know a green player when they see one, and they're focusing the brunt of their bending on this poor girl. This is getting really annoying. Korra thought to herself as she tried to dodge and return fire. But she was still new to all of this, and the opposing team was targeting her. When she saw fire, earth, and water flying right at her, she reacted on instinct and reached for the nearest bendable object, which happened to be the disc slots near her. 2 discs popped out and floated in the air before, acting as shields against the triple attack. Wait a minute, did that waterbender just earth bend? The commentator asked. The action made everyone in the crowd draw in a gasp of surprise and began whispering amongst themselves. The referee quickly blew his whistle. Foul, I think. Korra could grin sheepishly, even when her helmet fell over her eyes and the other 2 ferrets looked anywhere but her. Location. Air Temple Island. Did I see that right? The commentator asked from the radio. The White Lotus guardsmen sitting around it were a little confused but thought nothing of it. They were on break and they were enjoying it. Hold on, folks, we're just waiting for the referee's official call, but I think this replacement player could be there's no way. At that moment, Tenzin came up to the guards. Pardon me, everyone, have you seen Korra this evening? He asked them. She's not in her room. You've got to be kidding me. The commentator suddenly cried. She's the Avatar, folks, playing in a pro bending match. The guards were stunned to hear this, and the one who had been taking a drink from her cup spat it out. Can you believe this? As Tenzin listened, his eyes began to twitch and his head turned pink. I'll get her myself. He told them, turning around with an angry gust of wind. Location. Arena. After what felt like a long couple of minutes to the Fire Ferrets, the referee came back. The Avatar will be permitted to continue so long as she solely bends water. He declared, making the ferrets eye in relief, while the Platypus Bears complained a little. The bell rang again, and the Platypus Bears resumed their tactics. This girl might be the Avatar, but she's no pro bender, and the Platypus Bears are intent on exploiting that weakness. The commentator remarked as Korra was being pushed back to the edge of Zone 1. They're giving her their best, and her best ain't good enough to stop it. As she tried to block the barrage of bending being thrown at her, Korra couldn't hold it and was sent flying over the edge of the ring. And she's in the drink. It hurt a little when she hit the water, but she didn't let that stop her from swimming through it to the platform. She felt the pain still stinging her body as she reached and climbed up out of the water. But she stopped when she saw who was standing right there in front of her. Oh, hey Tenzin, she said to the airbending master nervously. I thought you didn't like coming to these matches. As she fully climbed out, he fixed her with his sternest look. Once again, you have flagrantly disobeyed my orders. You were to stay on the island. Let's go, he ordered her, turning away and walking away. But she wasn't going to be listening to him. No. I'm kind of in the middle of something. He stopped and slowly turned around to face her. I have tried my very best to get through to you by being gentle and patient, but clearly the only thing you've responded to is force. So I am ordering you to come back to the temple right now. Why? She asked. So I can sit around and meditate about how bad I am at airbending. You know, I'm beginning to think that there's a reason I haven't been able to learn it. Because, maybe, I don't even need it. She told him. That idea astounded Tenzin, and it was not in the good way. What? That is a ludicrous suggestion. The avatar needs to learn about airbending. It's not optional. No. This is what I need to learn. She exclaimed, gesturing back at the ring. Modern styles of fighting. Being the avatar isn't all about fighting, Korra. When will you learn that? She had had enough of this conversation, seeing that it wasn't going to go anywhere. I have a match to go finish, she said pointedly, heading over to the elevator. As she went upwards, the bell rang and the announcer said, "The Platypus Bears win round 2. Tenzin walked away from the platform and went back up into the stands, looking for the way out when the announcer cried out, "Round 3. And the bell rang. The Platypus Bears started throwing their bending at the Ferrets, and their plan soon became obvious. The Platypus Bears come out of the gate and quickly go after the Ferret brothers. They're corralled, wedged in the edge of Zone 1, unable to come to the avatar's rescue. And boy does she need it. Tenzin looked back at the ring and watched as Korra knocked back 2 zones. He covered his eyes and groaned slightly at the sight. Looks like the avatar's pro-bending debut is about to be cut short, the commentator declared. She's been pushed back to Zone 3 and the water is calling her name. She was indeed teetering at the edge, balancing on her toes to avoid falling in. When she saw a disc coming right at her, she spun out of its way, letting it pass and allowing her to get a more firm footing. She realized what kind of move she had used and Tenzin's words came back to her. Airbending is all about spiral movements. When you meet resistance, you must be able to switch direction at a moment's notice. These teachings will sink in over time. Then one day, they'll just click. I guess he was right, she thought to herself before turning back to the ring, moving into a beginning airbender stance. Be the leaf. It's only a matter of time before the commentator began before seeing how Korra now moved. Hold the phone. Stop the presses. She's still in the game, folks. And she's moving like an entirely different player. All of a sudden, the Platypus Bear's strikes are only striking air. Tenzin watched more intently now, seeing how she moved like she was supposed in the gates. None of the opposing team's bending struck her. Whenever one got close, she would simply turn away from it. How about that? He said to himself. Quickly enough, the Platypus Bears wore themselves out going after Korra like that, and the commentator saw that. The Platypus Bears have no juice left, but Mako and Bolin are still fresh and juicy. The brothers, no longer pinned in the corner, came back at the opposing team with a vengeance. And Korra was right there to help. Between the 3 of them, they started driving the Platypus Bears back. Since they had no energy left to fight back, all the opposing team could do was try and defend themselves until the bell rang. If they could do that, the match would be theirs. But the Fire Ferrets would not let that happen. They struck hard and fast, pushing each member of the Platypus Bears back harder and harder until the last one was sent flying out of the ring, courtesy of water from Korra. Knockout. The commentator cried as the bell rang. The Fire Ferrets come from way behind and steal the win. What an upset, folks. The rookies, Avatar and Toe, have nabbed a place in the Memorial Championship tournament. I cannot believe it. Korra just stood there, listening to the roar of the crowd as they cheered for her team. She went over to Bolin and they exchanged a high five, happy in victory. But the best part for her was when Mako came over and said, "Korra, what can I say? You really came alive in that last round. The way you dodged their attacks, you are a natural." "Thanks, but I can't take all the credit. Someone else taught me those moves," she told him. "And I'll have to apologize to Tenzin," she thought to herself. Hey, come on guys," Bolin said, grabbing them both by the shoulder and pulling them into a group hug. "Let's go and celebrate." "That sounds like a good idea," Mako agreed with a small smile on his face. They started walking back to their locker room, leaving the cheering crowds behind them. When they reached the locker, Arashi was waiting for them with a somewhat annoyed expression. "Hey, Arashi," Bolin said, sounding nervous for some reason. "How are you?" "I'm fine, I'm just wondering if you two had lost your minds," he replied, looking hard at him and his brother. "Seriously, you put her in the ring, the woman who got arrested her first day in the city?" he demanded, pointing at Korra. "Did you guys even give her a crash course on what to do in pro bending?" No," the earthbender offered weakly. "Hey, I helped them win," Korra told Arashi. "So just lay off on them." He looked at her for a moment before finally saying, "Fine." When she smiled, he avoided eye contact for some reason. "So where's Hasuk?" Mako asked with a scowl on his face. "I bet he said he had a good reason for not being here." "Actually, he does," the blonde replied. "He quit the team." "What?" Bolin said, completely surprised. "Why?" "He got promoted at his part-time job, he's full-time now. And he gave up the game for that." Mako fixed his brother with a stare. "Bro, he's got a family. If he had to quit the team so he can make sure that they get fed, we can respect his decisions." Now he felt bad for calling Hasuk no good and useless. It would also explain why he had been so out of focus the past couple of matches, Arashi added. He had been under evaluation for the promotion and it had been on his mind. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. "You know we should probably head over to his work one day and say hi to him." Bolin's face lit up with a big grin. "Actually, we were going to have a victory drink. We can stop by there for it. That way, we can tell Hasuk the good news." "Now that is a good idea," he agreed. "Well, what are we doing just standing around here?" Korra asked them all. "Let's get out of these uniforms and get going." Location: Air Temple Island. Tenzin was watching as the air acolytes rebuilt the gate contraption. He heard footsteps coming towards him and when he looked out of the corner of his eye, he saw that it was Korra and Arashi. "I'm really sorry," Korra apologized as he turned to face them. "About everything I said. I was really frustrated with myself and I took it out on you." "I think I owe you an apology, too," he replied. "I was trying to teach you about patience, but I lost mine." "No hard feelings?" she offered hopefully. "Of course not," he answered. "By the way, you were really good out there. You moved just like an airbender." "Wait, you stayed and watched?" "I did." He had even done a little victory shout when he saw the knockout, only to stop when he realized that other people had been watching. "Pro bending turned out to be the perfect teaching tool for you." They smiled warmly at one another, glad that the hostile feelings they were having were now gone. "I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early," Korra told him as she started jogging away. "And, by the way, I kinda permanently joined the Fire Ferrets and we're playing the memorial tournament in a couple of weeks." He had been surprised by that piece of news and sighed heavily at it. "Well, what did you expect?" Arashi asked him when he saw the sigh. "This wasn't going to be a one-time deal." "I am aware of that," Tenzin replied. "Anyway, Arashi, about what happened with Milo earlier." I know. I shouldn't have stepped in like that. You're the parent, not me." A look of sadness appeared on his face as he remembered a memory. But he quickly banished that memory and the look. "Look, let's just not talk about." "Very well, what do you think about the Fire Ferrets participating in the memorial tournament?" "I'm hoping that they make to the top and win," he said. "But I'm also hoping that Gigi will be there." "I am sure he will be." "It sure as hell doesn't feel like it," the blonde said with an acidic tone in his voice. "It feels like that he's not here anymore." "Arashi Uzumaki, that is your grandfather you're speaking wrongly of," Tenzin told him sharply, trying to head off what would have come next. Some of the acolytes stopped what they were doing to see what was going on, only to be told by others to keep working. "Has he not been there for every birthday that you have had? Has he not been there every time that day comes about?" "Yeah, he has," he admitted quietly. I just wish he would be here more." Without saying another word, he left the airbending master and the air acolytes behind, heading to the temple and his room. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.